Kia ora and welcome to another episode of the Leadership Lounge, a space for healthcare leaders to take a moment to pause, to reflect, to think and to get a fresh perspective on their world and the work that they're doing. I'm Katie and I'm your host, and with the 3 decades of working in healthcare, I now get to work with leaders and their teams to help them manage the demands and the complexities of their work, your work, so that you can feel excited and supported in the roles that you have got. And this week, kind of adding in a topic that I hope is one of those things that's going to be in that supportive frame, because right now there is so much going on, and when I'm listening and working with leaders, it's kind of like a lot of the sustainability stuff. It's a lot of the how do we keep going, showing up. This is really tough right now. There's not a lot of joy, enthusiasm or energy going on. It's just pretty hard going. So this is one of those things, and you can tell I'm like I don't know how I'm going to sell it. There's this idea of a supportive thing for your leadership and your role as a leader in healthcare. Now, took quite a lot of notes on this topic, so you will definitely hear my notepad flicking backwards and forwards as I go, and my writing was appalling, so this could be quite interesting. However, the topic this week, let me about reading fiction. And it's like, hello, what are you talking about? I don't have time to read my emails, let alone time to read a book. Hold that thought. I'm hoping over the next few minutes, I'll just give you some ideas and insights as to what you can get from reading fiction that might just make you go, okay, let's give it a go. Let's see what it does. All right then. So I did my usual, went off on a bit of a hunt to find out, okay, what's the evidence around this? Now, I personally am a reader, a fiction reader. I've read for a long time and happily lose myself in a book. So I was curious about this in general. Is there some stuff that says that leaders should be readers and should be rereading fiction? So I definitely call myself and introduce myself sometimes as a leadership nerd, and have got bookcase full of leadership books, and I go to the library to pick up one book and come home with 10, wondering when on earth am I going to read all of those. But over the last couple of years, I have definitely noticed I've been reading more fiction. So again, this kind of curiosity goes, so I enjoy it, but is there anything else in it, right? And I think the enjoyment part is important. So if you are not a book reader, do not play forcing yourself into this. This is, again, it's that fresh perspective. If you've not picked up a novel for a while because you've been, I need to read this leadership stuff, leadership stuff, maybe there's something in it and you can pick up something that might feel a little bit more enjoyable to read. Mind you, I'm a nerd. I really enjoy the leadership books. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Anyway, so I found about five big buckets, big reasons why reading fiction could support you as a healthcare leader. And I think right now, when we think about some of the challenges, I think it is quite a good idea to think about, okay, clearly we've got some different things to do. And there's one of the articles I looked at, I thought framed it really well in the fact that it says it's naive to think that insights and solutions for our challenges are going to be found in business or leadership books. The most difficult challenges we face as leaders are timeless, and often the best way to grapple with this is to take a more deliberate look at ourselves and our reality in a broader context. So inviting us into that world of a broader context to consider the challenges that we're facing. And I think with what is going on in healthcare right now, I think, let's try anything, okay? Anything, let's see what difference this could make. So my case then, if you like, for picking up a novel. So the first one definitely comes out wherever you look and read, is this idea of increasing your understanding and broadening out your perspectives and being able to see things from other people's point of view. So, point of fact, increasing your empathy, really tapping into that, expanding that space of curiosity. I wonder what that's like. being more open-minded. And the other thing that sort of fits into this big bucket, that's the understanding and empathy, is the realization that we're more alike than we're not. So sometimes it is about understanding why and how people are different from us, and that just being introduced to those kind of ideas, but actually that we've also got an awful lot in common. So why does that matter as a leader, that idea of empathy and understanding your fellow humans? So the reason why this matters and will make a difference for us leaders in healthcare is that it makes us more effective in engaging others. But it also makes us better at managing ourselves and how we're showing up. So that capacity for understanding and considering other people's perspectives means that the way you manage yourself in that situation will change. It can help guide your decisions and your actions. So when we have that increased empathy, then we can start to think about things differently and therefore then act a bit differently. So that was the first big bucket. The second one is quite connected, but it's this idea of emotional intelligence. It's around increasing emotional capacities. And so that's your own, yes, but it's also understanding other people's emotional reactions or how they're feeling and being able to connect with that. Increasing your emotional language, the emotional literacy that we have isn't generally particularly great. So it's expanding all of those things. Now, emotional intelligence, one of the quotes from one of the articles that I was reading, it says it actually is what differentiates the most effective leaders from the merely ordinary ones. So emotional intelligence is one of those things that you can sometimes be, oh yeah, it's because you understand, you can do the people stuff. It's actually a bit broader than that, and it's probably now going on the list of the, oh yeah, let's do an episode all about what is emotional intelligence, because I think it can be a bit misunderstood, and there's obviously connecting parts, but this idea of our emotional language and how we can understand, talk about, relate to, describe feelings and emotions, I think is often we run away from at work, but it's actually really important to how we're showing up, but equally how do we engage others. And so the other bonuses you get from being able to do that stuff is some sense of resilience, but also persuasion skills. And I think if you think about all the stuff that's going on right now, persuasion skills is probably going to be one of those core factors that that leaders are going to be needing in some shape or form. And then there's the third bucket I found was it's kind of like this big heap of stuff. I don't know exactly what the right term is for it, but it's kind of stuff that's kind of core to being a leader right now. But it's about decision making, managing conflict, tolerating ambiguity, strategic thinking, critical thinking, and this idea of managing through moral complexity and how you solve challenges. So there's a whole lot in there, and it is all connected to that idea of that how do you understand things from different perspectives. But that's what reading literature can help you sort of engage in. So a great example is the idea of how reading fiction can support your strategic thinking skills. And what it described was because you're kind of you're engaging in the story and the twists and the turns, and you're engaging intellectually with it, you start to imagine, how would you solve that problem? What might you do next? And you're sort of in it and trying to work it out. And so rather than doing a course on, I need to get better at strategic thinking, this is another way of adding that sort of skill set into your leadership capabilities. So a whole load in that bucket there. Moral complexity was an interesting one. One of the HBR articles actually suggested that as a team using a piece of literature to understand a complex problem or how you're going to solve a particular challenge. Now, they do point out that you can't just go, oh, here's my challenge. What book do I need to read for us to understand this as a team and think about it differently? They do say that this is about a longer term leadership capacity strategy. This is part of your long-term plan as a leader and development as a leader. However, they did give some clues into some questions that you could ask while reading a book that could be then taken back to a bit of a team conversation, or you could take those reflections into a team conversation. And those questions, it reminded me very much of like those notes you get at the end of some books for a book club discussion, which I do think are often a bit cheesy, but sometimes can be useful. However, this is written in HBR. It can't be that bad, can it? So it says, one of the questions it says is, what do the central characters have to teach me? Another question it suggested was, who do I find it easiest to relate to? Who do I find it the hardest to relate to? I thought that was quite a good one. How are the conflicts mapping out? How are they resolving the conflicts here? And then asking yourself, what would you advise the characters as they face this moral ambiguity or challenge? And then reflecting, how could you apply this to the real life situations that you're facing at work? So yeah, this HBR article was quite interesting in the way that they were framing how they used it. And as it weaved through the article, they did have some different books that suggested and pulled out the points that they were making their big three kind of leaders, if you like, as to why reading fiction matters is to connect, to correct, and to expand. So that was quite an interesting article, and it was really how you really exploring how as a leadership team you could explore the challenges. So a lot, like I said, a lot in that bucket there. The fourth bucket of ideas that I found was really about how your brain how it can help your brain work right now. And there was two things in here that was improve your writing. So reading fiction can improve your writing. And I instantly went to the reminder of how bad some emails can be, how poorly written they can be, and just of the terms of trying to get your point across or coming across with the wrong tone, all this kind of stuff. Our digital language is a whole other skill set, without a doubt. But it did make me think of, oh yeah, if we could all up our writing skills, that would be really cool. And if we could do it as easily as reading a fiction book, then that would be really nice. And I thought about all the business cases I've had to write over the time, all the memos I've had to send, and you write an email and you rewrite it and you get someone to check it. So all of that energy that goes into writing when you're a leader in healthcare, a bit of fiction reading could help support and improve that writing skill. The other thing in this bucket around how it can help our brain do what it needs to do right now is that it's going to support your attention span. Now, there's a lot in the news and literature right now around our decreasing attention spans down to a whole range of things, social media, mobile phone use, all of that kind of stuff. And I notice my attention span has decreased. So I really enjoy it when I do get lost in a book and can get wrapped up in a book like I used to. And it definitely is a skill I don't, or a habit, or whatever it is in my brain that I don't want to lose. And when we're thinking about the challenges that you've got, the amount of information that you have to deal with, being able to increase your attention span, that is going to be a very supportive thing for you as a healthcare leader right now. And then the fifth and final bucket that I found, and this is the one I'm hoping is really going to sell you on it, and reading fiction. It's this idea that it's a fun thing to do. It's pleasurable. You can get lost in that story and get wrapped up in it, and it can completely absorb you. It can be restorative. And that's definitely how I feel when I'm reading some books, this restorative nature of it. Like you've just had this weeks-long break, but you've actually just been reading a book. And there's been some studies done, and again, I'll pop the links in the show notes, around that readers and reading can reduce your stress. And the particular article that this, or research that this article quoted, said that it reduced stress by 68% in the cohort that they studied. And so with the amount of the intensity of the work right now, the struggle that people are having on so many levels, reading as an element of stress reduction is, I think, something that shouldn't be overlooked. We talk so much about some really great things. I know these are bad, right? This going outside, getting some exercise, connecting with friends, all of that really, really important. I guess I'm just making a case for the humble book, that can equally be a way of creating your opposite world in terms of the stories that you're reading, but also that idea of pleasure and restorativeness and stress reduction. So there you go. My 5, kind of having done my bit of research on this and got curious about the value of reading fiction for you as a healthcare leader. These 5 buckets. This idea of broadening out your mind, this blowing your perspectives and getting an understanding and empathy and curiosity around the world and other people and what that's going to then bring into your leadership. Then this idea of your emotional intelligence, your emotional understanding, emotional capacities, and how that's going to help you manage your own, but also understand others and make you stand out as a leader. And then a whole load of stuff that kind of feels like the day-to-day work of a leader around decision-making, managing conflict, tolerating ambiguity. Because you've broadened out, you've had all that, these watch characters as they manage these different scenarios. You're engaged in that space. You're understanding what's going on, and you can just pull on those and relate them to the context that you're working in. But this is part of a longer term leadership capacity strategy that you have. Then there's some practical things around improving your writing or increasing your attention span. And then my favourite one, which is this idea of that reading is restorative and it is stress reducing, and that we can do this for pleasure. And at the same time, we're getting these other bonuses as well. So the question then, if I've convinced you that it's worth putting some time, finding the time, creating the time to read, is what are you going to read? Well, when you start Googling what about that, you just get the usual leadership non-fiction books. So this was actually quite hard to do. So my top tips here, apart from Watership Down, that seemed to come up in a lot of the things. And I have to confess, I wasn't particularly intrigued by some of the books that were suggested in some of the articles, but some of the articles do have some suggestions. So, I have a type of style of book that I enjoy reading, and I do try and broaden that out, particularly having done this work, I'm definitely going to go and look at books a bit differently. My go-to for trying to track what's going on in books and what I could read or what I might read or what others are reading is to use Goodreads. I'll pop a link to it in the show notes. It's where I track what I've been reading, but I have a bookshelf there which is called Leading in Healthcare, and it is completely full of all the non-fiction stuff. So I'll pop in some of the books that have either stood out to me from books I've read in the past, but also the ones that have suggested. So you can click into there and have a look. I'd love to hear from you to see what you'd suggest, what books you would recommend that could be that type of novel that is going to engage and stretch the right side of your brain. So it's not so much the page turner, sink it into 24 hours, which is what I would do with a Lee Child book and feel completely reset and recharged afterwards, to be fair. But that's not going to give me all the empathy building and emotional intelligence kind of stuff as a different kind of novel. So it's that type of thing. So the page turner stuff, yes, you get that pleasure and that restorativeness from it, but you're not going to get the other benefits from it. So that's what we're trying to find, those novels that are engaging and stretch the right side of your brain, that creative and increasing the empathy space versus the left side of your brain. Okay. So what am I going to do? I'm going to share all the articles in the show notes. I'm going to put the links to the Goodreads and finding things, and really be interested to hear as to what you think about reading fiction and the benefits that you've noticed and what books you would recommend. My last top tip on the finding what to read could be to see what the leaders that you are inspired by, who you look to, what are they reading? It could be a great conversation piece with someone that you know, or you can Google what particular readers. I think Barack Obama is a good example in that he often will put a list up of his favourite music and his favourite books for a particular season. So what are the leaders that you admire and are inspired by? What are they reading in the space of fiction? So there we go. My case made for healthcare leaders reading some fiction is a different way, broadening out our perspectives and understanding so that we can tackle some of the challenges, the strategic thinking that needs to be done, the moral ambiguity over some stuff, and seeing how reading fiction is going to be able to support you in the work that you're doing right now. Thanks again for listening to the Leadership Lounge. It's been great chatting through this. It was an interesting topic for me to go and find out a bit more about and then to pass on to you. I'm your host, I'm Katie, and I will see you next week in another episode, or rather talk to you. Why do I always say that? See you next week. It's very daft. I will talk to you next week in another episode of the Leadership Lounge. Take care.